Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Weyandt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group, where we model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation of this great industry. This episode is part of Prefab Unfiltered, recorded live at Advancing Prefabrication. A lot of the conversations at this event center around speed, modular construction, and scaling prefabrication. But in highly regulated environments like life sciences and drug manufacturing, the conversation looks very different. Here, time to market can mean tens of millions of dollars per day. At the same time, every weld, every inspection, every process must meet strict regulatory standards. So how does prefabrication actually work in that world? That's what we're unpacking today. Today, I'm joined by David O'Connell, who brings a rare perspective shaped by generations in construction and decades of experience in semiconductor and life science facilities. From early modular utility racks in semiconductor cleanrooms to building drug development and manufacturing facilities across the country, he has seen prefabrication evolve in some of the most technically demanding environments in our industry. This is a grounded, practical conversation about what prefabrication looks like when compliance, quality, and speed all collide. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group. We are recording live from Advancing Prefabrication here in Dallas, Texas, and excited to welcome David O'Connell to the show. Thanks for taking the time and joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I like to get started with kind of your origin story. How did you get into this construction industry?
Sure. I'm fortunate in a strange way that I always knew what I wanted to do. At age 5 or so, I kind of fell in love with, my parents are based from Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And so I loved the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah.
And it was a symbol, like, because I grew up in New Jersey, and I just loved the Brooklyn Bridge. And he was Roebling was an architect / structural engineer. They didn't have structural engineers back in the day. They called them architects. And on my mom's side, my great-grandfather was an architect who built sky rises in New York in the 1920s.
Oh, cool.
And he also, because his wife, my great-grandmother, had allergies, he had a 300-acre farm out in Pennsylvania. So he would take the train into the city to work during the week and go back out to the countryside with the 7 kids out there. So my great-grandmother lived long enough, almost 100, that I had to really get to meet her. Unfortunately, my great-grandfather died like in the 1950s, but he was old. So I got a chance to my mother's side goes back 4 generations. Her father was an engineer with the railroad. Her grandfather was an architect who built all these things.
Yeah.
My mother was not an architect or an engineer, but her brothers, 2 of her brothers, were engineers.
Wow.
And then there's myself. So the 4th generation. On my dad's side, his father got a degree in mechanical engineering. I used his handbook 1985 when I went to college. He had graduated in 1918. Nothing had changed. Steam tables were the same. Everything I used in that handbook, the only thing I didn't use the last third of the book was logarithmic tables, because we had calculators by that point. So I was weird that I knew at age 5 that I wanted to be an architect or an engineer.
Yeah.
And so literally in junior high school, I was already taking mechanical drafting classes. By the time I got into high school, I had exhausted all of the things that I could do from a scholastic standpoint. And at age 16, did an independent study for a year with an architect as a high school kid. So I was really one of those weird people who've always kind of known what I wanted to do. And it's kind of been, I loved building things. And so when I finally graduated from college, I worked as an engineer here in Waxahachie, Texas for a little while, and then up in Illinois. And then I started my own engineering consulting at age 27 in California for the .dom. And I got into construction and building clean rooms for semiconductor equipment companies. And eventually in 2002, I pivoted my company to doing life science work because the semiconductor business is very boom and bust. And the construction cycles are great and it's fun, but I hated having to lay off people. So I would go from 18, 19 people to like 6 people, and that was stressful. I would much rather go in here and have a steady group of folks that I could deal with. And the investment cycle, the investors in life sciences with 7 to 10 years to bring a drug to marketplace. So they have a different event horizon. They're not necessarily expecting money back in 2 quarters, 3 quarters, which in microelectronics and semiconductors, like, make me money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I've done now for the last like 23 years, 24 years, has been building drug development facilities. That's what I do.
Yeah. That's really cool. The construction runs deep in your family.
It does.
That's
It
awesome.
does. Yeah.
One of the things that is just striking to me is, going back to that handbook concept of it. That's awesome.
It's in a shadow box. My wife put in a shadow box.
That's so cool. How much for, so long of construction's history that the industry didn't change that drastically, margin stuff around the edge. But when you look at the last 30 years, the rapid increase in change in the workflow processes and the technology that's come into the industry is an entirely different industry almost when you think about it. How have you noticed that change kind of play out in your day-to-day?
So if we go back 30 some odd years ago, when I first started in manufacturing, we started realizing semiconductor tools, equipment, they call them tools. They would have some standardized piping racks for them and electrical banks for them because they could roll them in and roll them out again. Because this is Applied Materials. They were trying to sell this equipment. So they had to demonstrate to the customers that it would actually work with their recipe in it. So they would have to put it into a clean room that was the same as their fabrication facilities. They would have to give it the gases of the same quality and the water and all the other utilities so that they could run 1,000 wafers through this equipment and then show the customer that we can demonstrate that you'll get the same yields. Then the customer would turn around and buy 25, 30, 50 of these things. By the way, this equipment cost at the time in 95, $500,000 to $5 million a piece. So these were not inexpensive things. And to demonstrate that it worked was really important. So we would create these demonstration labs and we would create these piping racks and electrical banks that were all cut and paste. So we would fabricate them off site. We'd have all the process piping done. They would bring it and we would just bolt it in place and then connect it and do the same thing with the electrical. So the idea of cut and paste was kind of glued into me from an early part of my construction career was, if you're going to be successful, get a prototype that works really well and then just copy and paste it along the way. So when we would make one of these manufacturing facilities, we'd have 50 to 100 of these things set up. And each one of these process piping racks, again, at the time, they were $25,000 to $50,000 back then. Now they're probably 4 times that price.
Yeah. So how does prefab factor into your day-to-day process today?
Well, I'm on a panel here tomorrow to talk about some of this prefab and the successes and the failures I've experienced in terms of like full building prefab in the life sciences. It's not been very successful. But to build an entire building, we just recently did a project for a European company a year and a half ago in Michigan. And most of the buildings were existing, so we're rehabbing those. But there was one building that we were having made by Pharma in China, and 168 modules shipped over and then put in place. It was very difficult to make that work well. It was not that great. Now, rewind, my first modular building that I ever did was Witch and Entech. This is back in South San Francisco. It was successful and yet not successful, reasons that had nothing to do with the modularity of the building. It had everything to do with the local building inspectors got pissed off because they didn't get a chance to inspect because it was made in another state. They were upset. So then all of a sudden they started looking at everything with a fine-tooth comb because they wanted to prove a point.
Right.
We got picketed because the union employees that were going to build all this stick-built stuff, they didn't get a chance to build it. So we had union plumbers and electricians picketing the job site because they didn't get a piece of the action. And so while the building itself was successful and putting it together and getting it up and running for the client was successful, the political fallout from all of that, and again, this is 17 years ago. People weren't ready for it. The regulatory people weren't ready. I mean, like the local agency having jurisdiction wasn't ready. Fire department, building inspectors, the trades weren't ready. I mean, nobody was ready for all this stuff.
Yeah. How have you seen that change over that 17-year period, or have you?
Well, I think the awareness of trying to get ahead of the curve. So now we go to the building, we go to the AHJ, agency having jurisdiction. We go to them and we talk to them about what we're going to plan on doing. And we come to an agreement with them. What needs to be inspected by their inspectors? Do we need to fly them at our cost to go wherever it is, Oklahoma, Sweden, wherever they're making it, China? And what level of acceptance what do they need to do that they're not going to allow another agency to do it? And so once you work that out and you get to an agreement on it, now you can come to an agreement. The union, non-union, depends on where you are in the country. Certain places it's a big sticking point, others it's not. So if it's a highly union construction space, you're going to have to go and meet with them and they're not going to be happy. You can use union to do those cross connects and all that other stuff, but they're only doing 10% of the job and it's not easy. You just have to work with them and you just hope that they don't pick at your job. They hope they don't cause issues.
Yeah. Talk to me about the communication front then, because there's some interesting hurdle. What we've been talking a lot about is how to bring the different stakeholders from the design team to the fab team and to the field team all together. But now you're throwing in another wrinkle of all the regulators. So how do you get everybody on the same page to be marching kind of in the same direction?
What I always advocate with my clients is you need to partner with the AHJs. And you need to have, in my opinion, monthly meetings with them, even if you're not actively doing something construction-wise, because one, you want to get a familiarity. You want to know who the chief building director, build relationships. Bring coffee, bring bagels and donuts and stupid things like that. Have those monthly touch points with not only the inspectors, the person you really have to bring in is the tax collector, the woman or man who is getting the tax revenue from your projected space that you're going to be building. This manufacturing facility is going to generate 1,000 jobs. It's going to create whatever amount of money that the city is going to get in taxes. You bring that person into that same meeting. And if you run into a log jam, you excuse yourself and go get a cup of coffee or go to the bathroom. They will hash it out. You come back 10 minutes later and he or she has gone in here and read the riot act to those inspectors and said, you know how many millions of dollars this is going to bring into the city? Shut up and make this happen.
Yeah.
And that I don't have to yell and scream. Yeah. They're doing it for me. But because we've created this relationship and we're doing it every month, if you need to, have it every other week. If you really need to, every week. And just establish that cadence. They get to know you. You're literally open kimono. If they have questions, you're going to tell them everything good, bad, or indifferent. So one of the things we came to an agreement with from an inspection standpoint, we would hire third-party inspectors, private inspectors that qualified. They met all the criteria to be an inspector for the city or county. We hired them on our dime and sent them to the remote location to do all the inspections. Every inspection was shared with them, whether it failed or passed. Mm-hmm. We never sugarcoated anything. So if the inspector was out there and framing wasn't done properly and he failed them because of a nailing inspection, they knew immediately. Mm-hmm. And they trusted us over time. So that the agreement we have with a lot of them is the final inspection always has to be done by the locals. The building department and the fire department have the final say. You can't get occupancy. You can't get a TCO, a technical certificate of occupancy. In general, we had an agreement. We shared with them everything, all of our successes and all of our failures. We never try to pencil over anything. If we fail the inspection, we're going to fix it. We're going to have them come back out, re-inspect it, make sure we pass. And when you do that enough times, over time, they get to realize that you're not pulling the wool over their eyes. You're partnering with them, truly partnering with them to make sure you get a good product on site. You're not pencil whipping something and just getting it here to cover it over.
Yeah. How do you guys manage well, let me back up. I'm going to rephrase it. Do you guys do it like when you're going into a building, is it fully modular or do you guys do a combination of modular with traditional build?
In general, we like to do a combination because there's stick-built things that just, when it comes to process piping, because there's a lot of that in drug development, moving liquids or powders from one thing to another, there's too much going on. The FDA, there's literally every weld has a unique name and number to it. Every one of them has to have a cert from who the welder is. Mm-hmm. And they have to be qualified and show that they're qualified. And then when you're doing orbital welding, the equipment has to be qualified. Everything has to be inspected. And it's really hard to do that with modular. It's super hard. So when it comes to the clean rooms, I like clean rooms that are done modularly. We have what they call a PAL and a MAL. MAL is material pass through. PAL is a personal, if people walk through. Those are very generic. It doesn't matter what company you're with. They have a bench. These things are very modular. They're literally almost the exact same size, regardless of where you go. So having a MAL PAL right next to each other that's modularly constructed, that just shows up on site. It's got the HEPA filters already in. They've already been tested. All we have to do is run from the air conditioning, the local air conditioning duct work, make our points of connection for electrical and lighting. It's easy peasy.
Yeah.
When it comes to the ballrooms where they're going to go and make the actual drugs, we can do a lot of that modular. What I really do, always do modular, always, is the utility panels. Just like in semiconductor, where we had this piping rack and electrical rack, in life sciences, we're constantly moving liquids and things from one machine to another. No humans are involved in that. That's all done through these utility panels, which have all these points of connections. All the electrical connections are on top. All of the gas connections are in the middle, and all the liquid connections are on the bottom. So we use WFI, which is water for injection. It's sterile, terminally sterile water. Again, if we have a leak, it's all down here. They don't have to worry about it over electrical.
Right.
So with those utility panels, we make those modular there, and they're expensive. They're about $100,000 a piece. They're not cheap. And everything's all built in so that it doesn't matter what piece of equipment, a chromatography skid, a dissolution, doesn't matter what it is. When we roll it up, we can plug it in, make it work. And that helps with the flexibility of how they're going to manufacture their drug, because they don't want to be a one-trick pony. The facility wants to be dynamic enough to be able to run multiple drugs.
Sure.
And that allows them to be able to, because all these things are in casters, they can pop the caster, slide that 15,000-pound piece of equipment out of the way and slide the next one in, lock it in place.
Yeah.
And then plug in all of their utilities and get it up and running.
Yeah. That's awesome. So bringing it back to advancing prefab here, any takeaways so far from the conference?
I've enjoyed meeting people out here on the floor and talking to people in the hallways. It's always interesting there's a ton of people here on BIM, and we use BIM a lot. And we're doing BIM for clash detection, and we're going to, if you're familiar with the level of design, LD 400 is where we typically want to get to, because we really want to know the takeoffs as accurately as possible.
Yeah.
A lot of times we only have money for LD 300.
You're not alone.
So it's all a compromise. I mean, as modular as I want to do it, I try to. Again, utility panels, always modular. Clean rooms, where it makes sense, modular. The buildings itself, I kind of shy away from that. I just think that there's too many things going on. An office building, fine. A warehouse, fine. But when it comes to the actual drug fabrication facilities, there's just too much going on to be able to do it modularly, because it's such a bespoke thing. It's very unique. And we try to build in a lot of flexibility from the utility panels that they can transfer to different utility panels. And there's a lot of piping between these different panels that could be 75, 100 feet away. So it becomes just a piping nightmare, and it's almost impossible to make it off-site.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Is there a conversation that the industry should be having that isn't having, or that we should be having more of?
Time to market, it's just like in semiconductor. Every day that we were not able to get a fab up and running, and again, this is like 30 years ago, I haven't done semiconductor in a while, but it was $50 to $75 million a day in lost production. It's getting to that level in drugs. Whereas these GLP-1 agonists, all of these Ozempic and Ozempic-like drugs, they're a license to print money. And so every day that you're not in production could be $75 to $100 million in lost production. So getting up and running and time to market right now, there's a saturation point in this marketplace. We haven't hit it yet, but it's coming in the next 5 years. At some point, your doctor's going to be, anybody who could be on a GLP-1 is going to be on weld, just like we did with statins. Everybody's on a stat, like 50 million people in the US. You will have a point not too far in the future where 50 to 75 million patients in the US are going to be on some type of GIP or GLP-1 agonist. That is going to be the amount of, that translates into dollars into 100 billion to 250 billion a year. A lot of money.
A lot of money. Yeah.
And so you're seeing them being built in Virginia, in North Carolina. you're seeing these facilities being built in Indiana. They're being built by half a dozen companies. It's not just the ones you've heard like Eli Lilly and the Danish company, whatever. You're seeing a lot of other players are getting in this marketplace, and it's time to market. And the quicker you can get things to market, get it out there on the marketplace, the better off you are.
For sure. So as we wrap up the conversation, a couple of rapid fire questions for you. What is the phrase modeling the future? What does that mean and look like to you?
Well, we call it MOF. I'm not kidding you. MOF.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
It's absolutely part of our lexicon.
Nice.
Modeling for the future, because in manufacturing, we don't know what's going to be the next success in a monoclonal antibody or another type of molecule that we're going to be doing. So we have to build in the flexibility in our manufacturing, or the client will not be successful. So we're always looking to go in here and to look for how the future is going to come, and how do we future-proof a facility so that we're not going to run back in there and spend another $100 million trying to fix something we didn't think about. So the future, we live in the future.
Yeah, love that. What does innovation mean to you?
I mean, innovation in general, I mean, I've been in the technology field here now for my entire career, and I personally love it. I embrace it. For drug manufacturer, FDA regulated facilities, change is not a good thing, because they want to make sure predictability, quality, predictability. So once they've got a design down and it's been approved, it's got to move heaven and earth to make a change, because it's very costly to go do it. So innovation is still there. They still want to do it. The research and development definitely has all that going on, but in manufacturing, it's a lot to ask to change something. So they have to really think about it ahead of time. That's why we build in that flexibility on the front end, because if we have to do it after the fact, it's change control, and change control has to go through the FDA. I mean, it's expensive, it's lengthy. We have to prove everything that we do has sterility, and that can be a problem.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
How do people connect with you and learn more information on what you got going on?
Sure. I mean, my company, we're Varista. We're based out of Indianapolis. That's our headquarters. We have offices in Boston, San Francisco, obviously Indianapolis. And I just started 2.5 years ago, our Raleigh-Durham office in North Carolina. So to get a hold of us, I mean, we have our website, obviously, and we're based out of there in Indianapolis. People know us in the industry. They come to us, and we usually embed ourselves, and we're in with a client for years. You know, I'm typically 3 to 5 years at a client, go to the next one, and so on and so forth. But our company, we typically last 10 to 15 years at a client to help them through all the regulatory issues and stuff.
Nice. Well, final question for you. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing, what would you pick to innovate?
I think our inspection process it's necessary, but oh my God, is it complicated? Because when it comes to us, we're not only dealing with the AHJs and all the local inspectors, we have all the FDA, the EMEA coming in. And so it's literally 4 or 5 different sets of inspections that we have to go through. And it literally takes a year and a half to qualify a facility. It's a
long time.
A lot. So we can crank out the construction as fast as possible. And then we have to, it's like the Missouri, the show me state. We have to show everybody that everything we did meets all the criteria.
Yeah.
And that takes months, years.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's a laborious task.
Yeah.
Well, David, thanks so much for taking the time and being patient as the expo hall gets morphed to take it down all around us. Thanks for taking the time.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Cheers.
And now it's time for my Todd takes from this episode. First take, prefabrication has to respect regulation. In life sciences and pharmaceutical manufacturing, you are not just building space. You are building regulated environments that must pass inspection, documentation review, and long-term compliance scrutiny. Prefab does not eliminate that responsibility. If anything, it increases the need for precision. If we want prefabrication to scale in highly regulated sectors, we have to stop treating inspectors and agencies as obstacles. They need to be partners early in the process. Regulatory alignment is not optional. It is foundational. Second take, not everything should be modular. One of the most important realities from this conversation is that full building modular has not consistently worked in life sciences. Where prefab does shine in components, utility racks, panels, and repeatable systems that can be tested, documented, and inspected before arriving on site. Industrialized construction is not all or nothing. The smart play is understanding where prefab adds value and where traditional methods still make sense. Maturity means knowing the difference. And finally, time to market changes the equation. In pharmaceutical manufacturing, time to market is not a convenience. It can mean tens of millions of dollars per day. That reality reshapes how owners think about construction strategy. Prefab is not just about efficiency, it's about accelerating production capacity while maintaining compliance and quality. When time carries that level of financial weight, the conversation shifts from cost savings to schedule certainty and risk mitigation. Prefab becomes a strategic lever, not a tactical choice. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our sponsor, Great Tech Group, at greattech.com for more information. You can listen to this podcast anytime by simply going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out our website, bridgingthegappod.com. As always, I'm Todd Weyandt, thanking you for joining the conversation to model the future on the Bridging the Gap podcast. Keep innovating.